and even one person who's coming to Sweden. So welcome everyone to today's chat. Feel free to drop wherever you are in the chat. If he thinks he's the furthest away so far. Wherever in the world you're joining us from, a big hello to all of you joining online. Let's get into today's webinar, which we're going to look at which we're going to look at the Google Certified Innovator Program, particular applications for Sweden. As we go through today's call, if you have any questions about the Innovator Program, applying to the program, or any questions for existing innovators, feel free to drop them in the chat space where you just said hello. Drop your questions in the chat as we go today. Okay, so you may be aware this is the 20th anniversary of the Google Certified Innovator Program. So we're celebrating 20 years since the first group of innovators gathered together in Mountain View. And for the very first academy ever held, you had to live within a 50-mile radius of Google's offices in Mountain View. Thankfully, that is no longer the case, and we're accepting applicants for all of our academies from all over the world. You can apply to attend any of our academies this year. And for the first year ever, after 20 years, this is the first time we've run the academy specifically with Gemini in mind. And we see Gemini as being an integral part of the Google Certified Innovator Program. And that means we're expecting people who are coming along to the academy to be using Gemini to support them to develop a solution to a challenge. However, what this doesn't mean is that your challenge has to be about AI. So we are still, as we have done for the last 20 years, accepting people applying to the Innovator Academy to solve the problems and challenges that they're facing in education. And those challenges could be across the whole range of education space. So I just want to be clear from up front here, it does not mean your challenge has to be about Gemini or about generative AI. You can apply with any challenge you want, but this year more than ever, we're going to use the power of Gemini to help us develop solutions to the challenges. So we're using Gemini in the process. You don't have to apply with a Gemini-based challenge. Okay. So lots of different academies coming up this year. We've already accepted and closed some of these. Actually, Sweden's not on the list. I'll come to Sweden in a second. Originally, as you know, we're going to go to Dubai this year, but that location has been moved to Sweden. But there are a range of academies running throughout the year with different deadlines to apply for. Nearly all our academies are in English language, except for our Brazilian academy, which is in Portuguese, and our online academies, which can use both speech translation now and also Meet Translate if you want to access those academies online. But we're going to focus on this academy in particular today, and that's our newly announced academy, SWE 26, our Stockholm-based academy. This is taking place from May the 27th to 29th. And I know I'm doing this webinar today for GEG England, so this is specifically in the UK school half term at the end of May. And we are currently in an open application window for this academy. Applications are open from now all the way through until the 10th of April. So you have until the 10th of April to decide if you want to apply to this academy. It's an in-person academy, so you have to be able to attend in person to the address there, which is in central Stockholm on May the 27th, 28th and 29th. If you can't do that, you can obviously apply to one of the two online academies. So there's one left now, one online academy this year, as an alternative way of accessing this. In terms of attending an in-person academy, you need to fund your own travel to get to the location that you choose. So you need to fund your own travel and accommodation to Stockholm. Google will provide all the food, and there's no cost to do the Innovator program when you're there. They'll provide all food from when the event starts to when the event finishes, but travel and accommodation is your choice. And obviously, if that is a barrier to taking part, you might want to consider the autumn online cohort. So it is indeed good food. So let's get into how to apply to become a Google Certified Innovator. So the first thing, you need to be certified, and this year we're asking people to be level 1, level 2, and Gemini Certified Educator. So there are 3 certifications you need to complete, and you need to have completed them by the day the application closes for the academy. So in this case, you've got until April the 10th to complete the certifications. And you need to think of a challenge that you're facing in the classroom. We'll talk about this in more detail. You're going to record a video, and then you're going to apply by the deadline to join us. And we're going to go into the application process in a lot more detail in today's webinar. Okay. So it'd be nice for you to find out in the chat what people have got already. Let me know if you're level 1, level 2, Gemini educators, and anything else that's joining us. We might have some champions on the call, Google certified trainers, coaches, GEG leaders. You do not need to be a trainer to apply for Innovator or a coach to apply for Innovator. You need to be level 1, level 2 and Gemini certified educator. For some people, this is their first champions level certification, and it was for me. I applied to Innovator first before I later became a trainer. So let's move on through. So how to apply? You can visit the Google for Education website and press the Apply Now button, but ultimately it takes you over to our application website, which lives over at gfeapplications.com. Now, a couple of tips about using our applications website. The first one is when you get there, you can sign in with a Google account. That Google account is tied to your application. So obviously, if you sign in at work with your work account, when you get home, you'll need to sign in with the same account to carry on the same application. If you sign in with a different account, you won't see your previous application. Some schools block the ability to sign into external accounts, so some of you may need to sign in with a personal Gmail from the start. It does not matter which account you sign in with when it comes to applying for Innovator. It doesn't need to be tied to a school account. We will ask you some questions about your school on the form. Which account you sign in with the platform is totally irrelevant to that process. So you're going to go on and sign in, and then sign in the Google account and select, in this case, the academy you want to apply for, which, given that you joined the Sweden call today, it might be Sweden, but of course it could be one of the others. You can apply to as many Innovator academies as you want within a particular year group, but I would recommend against putting identical applications in for every academy, because obviously if the first one is unsuccessful, it's likely that the other ones might follow the same pattern. So I would always recommend people apply for the ones that are closing soonest and then change their application if they need to, if they're not successful. Right, so now let's talk about the form. So I'm going to walk you through the application form and talk about some tips for filling the form in at this point. So obviously you start with some basic information about where you work. You don't have to work in a school to apply to the Certified Innovator program, but your challenge has to be focused around education. So it's not has to be a school. You might be working in a non-profit or something else, that's perfectly acceptable, but your challenge must relate to education in schools. So tell us what sort of organisation you are, and if your school has a Google Workspace domain, tell us the domain name of that organisation, which is why it doesn't matter which email you use, as I mentioned earlier. Then, obviously, your address, where you live, just so we know from geographical reasons where you are. And if you want to give a secondary email address, like a work address, you can put it on the form at that particular point. We don't base our selection based on geographical regions, so it doesn't matter whether you live near or far from Stockholm for this academy, but it's useful to know where people are coming from. That's why we ask for address, and occasionally for our online cohorts, we might post things out, or for in-person, we don't do that. Be useful to find out how many times people on this call have applied to the Certified Innovator program. So feel free in the chat to let me know how many times if you applied. Louis said he's applied twice. I applied 3 times. So my first 2 applications were rejected to the program, and then I was accepted on my 3rd application. And that's perhaps why lots of different numbers coming up in the chat here. If you aren't accepted on your first application, go again, apply again. Think about maybe reach out to some innovators, but think about, your application. A lot of people who got in 2nd or 3rd time sort of, applied with something different or a different tack when they went again. And I certainly changed my application each time until I was accepted back in Mountain View in 2016. So, let's get into the form. So after that, you answer a question, and in terms, someone did get after 5 times. After that, you answer a question about the academy, whether you've got the time commitment for this to go to Sweden in this case. So you ask the commitment question, and you upload your certificates. On this one, please make sure that you upload the actual certificate with your name on. That's what we use to check that you've got a certificate. Don't upload a picture of the badge, which some people do, because obviously the badge is online, anyone can find a picture of the badge. We want the certificate with your name on, and it needs to be in date. And that means it needs to not expired by the closing date of the application. So for this academy, we'll give certificates that have not expired by the 10th of April. So you upload certificates, and then we start asking some questions. So the first question really is we'd like you to share a link with, we'd like to share a link, an example of your social media or a way in which you share your online advocacy with other people. Could be a blog, could be LinkedIn, could be on a social media platform. It's entirely up to you to choose what you share here and then describe it to us. Please make sure across the whole application form that the links are links that when we click them, we can see what the sort of content is that you are sharing. So don't use, in this case, an example of something that's not perhaps publicly viewable. It could be a class blog. You don't need to be on social media for this. It could be some way in which you share things with other people. And then tell us about another community you're part of and how you contribute to that community. And the reason why we ask these community questions is because you're joining a community of innovators, and the application form is looked at and scored by existing innovators. And so they want to know about the sort of people that want to join. And so this is your chance to show examples of how you might like to advocate and share. Then we ask for a specific example. So we'd love to see a link to a piece of content you created that has inspired change in others. It doesn't have to be some huge, massive project. It could be something you've done at a classroom level in your class with your students, or it might be a school-based project that you've done. Again, like every other link on that I'm mentioning here, make sure that anyone on the link can view the thing that you're sharing. If you want to check that, open it in an incognito window to make sure it loads up without the need to sign in. And then underneath, you explain what you've shared with us. So explain what the link is to and how it inspired change in others. So we're looking for examples of existing innovative practice that you might have at this point. Then we ask a question about Google Workspace, and it'd be lovely to hear from the existing, we've got some existing innovators on the call. I might ask some of them to give us an answer at this point. What feature you might like to see in the future in Google Workspace. Now, we don't steal these ideas and build them into Workspace, but this is an idea of thinking about what you think might come as Workspace evolves. I'm going to pick on a few people here whose existing innovators I've got in. Matt, do you remember what you put for this question? Did you answer this question for your application?
I did answer this, and I can't remember exactly what it was, but I know I tried to steer away from saying something Gemini because I felt like everybody was going to say a Gemini answer. Not that that's wrong, but it was something I tried to be a bit more practical, if I remember. So I away from Gemini.
You kept away from the obvious sort of Gemini in classroom type answer that I think you could have got away with a couple of years ago. So I don't think we'd even done Gemini in classroom at that point. Louis, I don't know whether you had one on your form. I don't know whether this went back as far as 2019. Don't we ask this question in 2019?
No, we had stranger questions. We had something about like a playlist that you'd live your life to, or something like that.
Yeah, I think we did ask the question in a different way back then, because obviously the application form has evolved over time. But thank you both for sharing a little bit about your application there. Let's keep going. So we asked that question on the form, what you'd like to see in Google Workspace. And also how you keep yourself up to date with trends in education and technology, whether that's through social media, through attending events, through communities. What is it that you use that helps that happen? Moving on. We then want to know why you want to be a Google Certified Innovator. So this question is a question with a 300-word limit. So you'll notice that each question has a word limit count. You can't add more words than that to the box. So it will count your words and it will indicate as you fill the form in how many words you've used. This is really about explaining why you want to be an innovator, what is driving you at this point to apply for the program, and what maybe you hope to get out of being a Google Certified Innovator. Then we come on to the most important part of the application, because all of those earlier questions are nice and we find out about you as a person. But in reality, the thing that carries the most points and makes the most difference to whether you get accepted or not is the challenge that you present. People who apply to the Innovator program are applying with a challenge that they would like to solve. That could be a challenge at a small scale in your classroom, at a school scale, at a district scale, or even wider. It's up to you to decide the challenge, but the challenge is the key to the application. You could be amazing on social media, have done amazing stuff in the past, but if your challenge is weak, you probably won't get accepted. And the opposite could be true. You could have an amazing challenge and not done well in the first section, and you probably will get accepted because far more of the marks for the application process come from the challenge than anything else. So if there's one bit you need to get right, it's this challenge. Now, as I mentioned earlier, your application is looked at by existing Google certified innovators. That's who scores the applications. And so they are based all around the world. So when you're filling in your challenge, think about explaining this to someone who might not be in the same country as you. Make sure you explain your challenge and try and avoid the use of localized terms. Or if you do use a localized term, maybe explain what that means. So for example, in the UK, we would predominantly say something like SLT to refer to school leadership. But in Spain, that's a different word. If I go to the US, they tend to call them admin. They've got different words for that in different parts of the world. So make sure if you are using acronyms or pieces like that, that you explain it in a bit more detail. So let's look at the challenge questions. So we start by asking you to describe the challenge, what it is and why it matters, why it needs to be solved. And then we'd like you to do a piece of research where you interview somebody else impacted by the challenge to understand the problem from their perspective. Because it's likely the challenge that you're trying to solve isn't just about you as an individual. I'm guessing it's going to affect other people, possibly students, possibly other teachers, or it might be a wider community-based challenge that's going to affect parents. Whoever it is, we'd like you to go and interview them so you understand the challenge from their perspective. Because sometimes we find that innovators solve challenges for themselves that don't really actually solve the problem for the end user, the person that's experiencing that problem. So we want to make sure that we can be focused on our users as we go through this. And so for that reason, once you've interviewed them, we ask you to write a point of view statement. And a point of view statement just frames your challenge in a certain way so we can compare the challenges as we go through. And so you insert the name of the person. So maybe you've spoken to a student called James, and he's a student who wants or needs something. So there might be a student called James who maybe needs to improve their literacy skills because they value the importance of literacy to be able to succeed in education. That could be a point of view statement. We're saying what is it that person needs? What are the challenges that person's facing? And that helps us when we get to the academy to start thinking about solutions. At this point in the application, we're never going to mention a solution because we don't really want people applying to the Innovator Academy who've already sort of solved the problem. We're looking for people with challenges that need solutions. So, move on. So we did the how might we question, where we frame it in that way. So, how might we question is really just framing it in a certain text that implies a few things. So the firstly, we're saying, how might we? It's not how should we or how could we, but how might we? And that means it might be possible to solve this problem, but it might not. We might actually go through this process and discover that the challenge isn't suitable and we need to iterate and change. So we think it might be solved. How might we? The word we implies that a group of people are going to need to work together. It's rare a challenge can be solved by an individual. It's going to require a number of different stakeholders to be arranged and in place to be able to solve a challenge. So when we think about the how might we statement, we don't want to have a big broad statement. So, how might we fix education is way too broad for us. At the same time, how might we use Google Sheets to track attendance is realistically a solution. It's not a problem. Indeed, the problem might be how might we improve school attendance for a particular group of students at this particular school. But how might we use Google Sheets giving me a solution, and it might not even be an appropriate solution? But how might we visualize student progress so they have ownership over their own learning journey? And that's a nice how might we statement. It talks about who our users are, it talks about the reasons why we want to try and solve that problem. So we're asking you to write a how might we statement for your challenge. And then we'd like you to just have a quick search and say, has anyone else done any work in this space? Often there will be existing solutions out there to challenges that you will present, because people have had this problem elsewhere and they've come up with ideas. But maybe that solution doesn't fit. Maybe that solution doesn't fit the what you need at this particular point in time. So what I'd like you to do is think about that and be honest. If there are things out there and it doesn't really work for you, you can say that at this point. So we think about our challenge, we do a how might we statement, and then we need a video. So for the video, we're looking for 90 seconds. And the 90 seconds is broken down into two parts. The first 30 seconds, you're going to introduce yourself, say who you are. And then the last minute approximately is where you talk about your challenge and why it's important to you. You might mention your how might we statement. You might talk about the person you've interviewed. You're really just selling us the idea that this is a challenge that needs to be solved. As Lewis said, we're looking for 90 seconds here. So if you submit a video that's massively long, let's imagine you submit a 10-minute long video, our scorers are going to watch the first 90 seconds of that video. So we watch the first 90 seconds. Now, we're not going to massively penalise you if you're 91 seconds, but obviously if you're massively over, we're not going to sit and watch an hour-long webinar about your challenge. So think about trying to get the message over in 90 seconds and trying to tell us why you're the person to solve it. There are no marks whatsoever for video production skills. Okay, we're not recruiting video production certified innovators here. So there are no marks of this for your video skills. Having said that, you could record it in Google Meet. You could be doing like we're doing now, talking to something, talking to camera. Those always go down very well. Obviously, it needs to be actually legible. So there is a certain level of video production you need where we can hear and see you. That would be useful. But beyond that, don't please spend hours sort of, animating it in clay or something. It's not going to score you any extra marks for video production. What is important is that you come across as the person that can solve the challenge. And that's what's key in that video. So try and connect with the person watching. We don't say in the rules that you have to be the person speaking on the video, but I would recommend that you potentially you record yourself within the video. I've seen some applications where people have used AI avatars or other things, because you can do that in Google Vids now. But the bottom line is it doesn't therefore come across very well connected to you if you do that. And so I think it's much better. I would say you probably stand a better chance if you just record yourself than if you use sort of an AI-powered avatar videos. No rules say you can't, but I think the ones with people in tend to score better. So you're going to record a video, about 9 seconds in length, talk about those key things. If you want to see some existing videos, you can do on the YouTube channel. Matt, you got a question?
I was literally just about to say that. Yeah. I was just going to say, like, when I applied, there are some really fantastic ones out there, that kind of, again, got their passion across. One that will always stick out is Luke Craig's, which I know is still available. Luke Craig, who now works for Google. But like the thing that sticks in my mind for him is him standing in the street in where he lives in his West Ham football shirt, putting his message across. Not that you have to wear your football shirts, but again, it kind of sticks in my mind, that conversation and the message behind what he was getting across as well.
Yeah, I think that is, it's the person coming out of the video, and you'll even notice in the screenshot there's quite a few where the person's at front and central. There are some playlists on our YouTube channel, and those playlists contain the successful videos for a number of recent academies. So you go and check those. As Lewis said earlier, we have over the years varied slightly the requirements for the programme. We've also varied the video length. Lewis got it a tough year when we were 60 seconds. So just bear in mind that particularly as you go further back in time, those videos are going to be not as much as what we're going to see today. We're looking at some of the recent cohorts like Amsterdam, probably worth a watch in terms of what we're looking for in terms of videos. So don't forget to use the videos as a potential source of ideas for you at that point. I missed that out. So that really sort of after the last half an hour sort of takes me through the key sort of tips for applying. At this point, what we normally do is stop the recording and just sit and answer questions from people who have questions about applying. So we're going to pause the recording because not everybody wants to ask questions, is that, and we're going to do open